She dreamed of serving her country, a patriot in the making. But she vanished from inside one of America's most secure military bases. The Army said they had no leads. Her family said it was a cover-up. The truth would ignite a firestorm of justice that reached the Oval Office itself. The case file on Specialist Jasmine Carter opens on a note of idealism and aspiration. Born on September 30, 1999 in Houston, Texas, Jasmine was a vibrant young woman with a singular, deeply held dream: to wear the uniform of the United States Army. For her, it wasn't just a job, it was a calling, a way to protect her nation and embody the virtues of a hero. From a young age, she dedicated herself to this goal, training with a fierce determination that impressed everyone around her. By the age of 19, she had achieved her dream, enlisting in the Army and eventually being stationed at Fort Hood, one of the largest military installations in the world. But the reality she found within the gates of Fort Hood was a world away from the honorable service she had envisioned. The dream quickly began to curdle into a nightmare. Instead of camaraderie and purpose, she discovered a culture that felt, in her own words, filthy and disgusting. In early 2020, her mother, Gloria, noticed a change in her daughter. The bright, ambitious young woman she knew seemed withdrawn, her spirit dampened by a heavy sadness. When Gloria pressed her, asking what was wrong, Jasmine was initially hesitant. She didn't want to burden her family with her troubles. But the pressure had been building, and eventually, it broke through the surface. In a burst of frustration and pain, Jasmine confessed that the men in her unit were garbage. The truth was stark and horrifying. Since joining the service, Jasmine had been subjected to relentless sexual harassment by a superior. This wasn't an isolated incident. She told her family that it was a pervasive sickness within the ranks, an unspoken rule where new recruits and lower enlisted soldiers were preyed upon. Those who dared to resist or speak out were met with professional retaliation, their careers stonewalled, their ambitions crushed under the weight of a corrupt power dynamic. Her mother, fiercely protective, demanded to know the name of the man tormenting her, but Jasmine refused. She knew her mother's protective instincts would lead her straight to the base, demanding justice in a way that Jasmine feared would only create more trouble for her and her family. Perhaps she still clung to a sliver of hope that the situation would resolve itself, that her dream wasn't entirely lost. She chose to keep the identity of her harasser a secret, a decision that would prove to be tragically fatal. April 22, 2020 was supposed to be Jasmine's day off, a day to rest, to clear her head, to be away from the toxic environment of the base. But that morning, her phone rang. It was a superior ordering her to come in and cover a shift. In the military, such a request is not a request at all. It's an order. Reluctantly, Jasmine put on her uniform and drove to Fort Hood. She would never be seen alive again. As evening fell, the time for the shift change came and went, but Jasmine didn't return home. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. A knot of dread tightened in her family's stomach. They immediately contacted Fort Hood, desperate for information. No one had seen Specialist Carter since some time after lunch. This answer was unacceptable. Fort Hood is a city unto itself, a fortress of military power secured by checkpoints, patrols, and countless surveillance cameras. The idea that a soldier could simply vanish without a trace from within its perimeter defied all logic. That very night, Jasmine's frantic family drove to the base, demanding to see security footage, searching for any clue that could point them to her whereabouts. The request was denied. The reason given was a bureaucratic wall: military secrets. 3 days crawled by with no word, no updates, no sign of Jasmine. The family's initial fear had now hardened into suspicion. They had lost all faith in Fort Hood's ability or willingness to find their daughter. On the third day, they returned to the base, demanding a clear account of the investigation's progress. Again, they were met with resistance. Citing personal privacy regulations, the military officials refused to share any details, offering only hollow promises to notify them if new information emerged. By the sixth day, a horrifying realization began to set in. The Army wasn't just failing to find Jasmine, it seemed they weren't even trying. Desperate, the family went to the local police department to file a missing persons report. They were turned away. This was a military matter, they were told, and civilian law enforcement had no jurisdiction. It was a case trapped within a closed system, a system that seemed designed to protect itself above all else. Trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare, the Carter family sought outside help, finding their way to a lawyer named Natalie Kawam. Kawam specialized in military cases, and when she heard the name Fort Hood, a knowing, cynical smile crossed her face. "Don't expect anything from Fort Hood," she told the family. "You will never find her if you rely on them." She knew the base's dark reputation all too well, a place notorious for sexual assault, abuse of power, and even murder. Natalie Kawam knew that to break through the stone wall of the military, they needed a different kind of weapon: public opinion. She advised Jasmine's older sister, Maya, to take the fight to social media. Maya created a post detailing Jasmine's disappearance, the harassment she had endured, and the military's infuriatingly passive investigation. The post exploded. It was a spark that landed on a field of dry tinder. The story of the missing black soldier tapped into a deep well of frustration and anger. Her story quickly became intertwined with the hashtag #IamVanessaGillian movement, which was already gaining traction. The two cases, though distinct, told the same horrifying story of systemic failure and abuse. The public outcry became a deafening roar. Forced into the spotlight, Fort Hood held a press conference. Their statement was a masterclass in denial. They flatly asserted that there was no evidence Jasmine had ever been harassed and dismissed all accusations as baseless rumors. They claimed an investigation was underway, but their words rang hollow. The public saw through the facade. The Army's credibility, already hanging by a thread, plummeted. A month passed. Still no news of Jasmine. The family's hope began to give way to the darkest possible fears. In a tearful television interview, Maya looked directly into the camera, her voice thick with grief but unwavering in its resolve. "If my sister is never found," she vowed, "I will make sure Fort Hood pays for this. This is my promise to her." It was a declaration of war against an institution that had failed them at every turn. The search for Jasmine continued, now a highly organized effort. The Army, under immense public pressure, finally assigned more soldiers to the search, but their efforts yielded nothing. The Carter family, having no trust left in the military, enlisted the help of a nonprofit organization called Texas EquiSearch, a volunteer group renowned for finding missing persons. The involvement of EquiSearch changed everything. On June 21, 2020, their volunteers were searching near the Leon River, miles from the base. There, they made a gruesome discovery. Partially buried in the earth were 3 heavy-duty black plastic containers. Inside, they found human remains that had been dismembered. Forensic analysis quickly confirmed the unspeakable. The victim was Specialist Jasmine Carter. The discovery sent a shockwave of outrage across the nation. The public was left with one burning question: how could a professional military, with all its advanced technology and trained personnel, fail to find Jasmine for over 2 months, while a civilian volunteer group found her with relative ease? The suspicion that the Army never truly wanted to find her intensified into a certainty for many. Was it incompetence, or was it a cover-up? With the discovery of Jasmine's body outside the military base, jurisdiction shifted. The case was now officially a homicide investigation, and the FBI took the lead. What the Army had failed to do in over 2 months, the FBI accomplished in 2 days. The investigation immediately zeroed in on the person who had last seen Jasmine alive, her direct superior, Specialist Aaron Robinson. Robinson was the one who had called her in on her day off. Multiple soldiers confirmed that he and Jasmine were the only 2 people working in the armory that day. He was the last link in the chain. Investigators pulled Robinson's phone records. On the night Jasmine disappeared, he had made dozens of frantic calls to his girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, before she finally answered. The pattern suggested an urgent, desperate need to speak with her. Investigators knew Aguilar was now a key figure in the case. They brought her in for questioning. Initially, Cecily stuck to a flimsy story, claiming Aaron had just been calling to make plans for a date. But under hours of skilled interrogation, her composure crumbled. The wall of lies collapsed, and she confessed everything. According to Aguilar, Robinson knew he and Jasmine would be alone in the armory that day. He had called her in with the intention of sexually assaulting her, but he had underestimated Jasmine. She was physically strong, a fighter, and she resisted him fiercely. The confrontation escalated into a violent struggle. In a fit of rage and panic, Robinson grabbed a hammer and bludgeoned her to death. Realizing what he had done, he called Cecily, his voice laced with terror, and confessed the entire sordid tale. He begged her to help him dispose of the body. One might wonder why he would entrust such a dark secret to another person. The answer, as it often is in such cases, lay in a twisted bond of mutual compromise. He and Cecily shared other dark secrets, creating a form of trust built not on love, but on mutually assured destruction. She agreed to help. The full picture was now clear. The timeline, the motive, the method. The case was solved. But the fact that the FBI had unraveled it in 48 hours while the Army had produced nothing for 60 days only fueled public fury. The military later released a statement claiming their own investigation was also pointing towards Robinson and Aguilar, but it was too little, too late. No one believed they had any genuine intention of bringing one of their own to justice. But just as it seemed a semblance of justice was within reach, the case took another shocking turn. On July 1, 2020, the Army informed the FBI that Aaron Robinson had escaped custody. He had simply walked off the base. The news was met with disbelief. How could a prime murder suspect held on one of the most secure military bases in the country just leave? There was no time to assign blame. A massive manhunt was launched by the FBI and local police. They tracked him to a location 4.3 miles from Fort Hood. As officers closed in, Robinson pulled out a handgun and, in a final act of cowardice, took his own life. His death answered the question of his guilt, but raised new ones. Where did he get the gun, and who, if anyone, had helped him escape? His suicide did not quiet the public's demand for answers. Congress launched its own investigation into the culture at Fort Hood. It became clear that Robinson was not the only person who had harassed Jasmine, but identifying the others proved impossible. With Robinson dead, Cecily Aguilar was the only one left to face legal consequences for her role in the horrific aftermath. For Jasmine's family, and especially her sister Maya, this was not enough. Justice for Jasmine was incomplete as long as the system that enabled her murder remained intact. Her case, now a national symbol of injustice, became a powerful catalyst for the passage of the Vanessa Guillen Act, a landmark piece of legislation that had been championed by the family of another victim of the military's broken system. The Carter family, now prominent figures in the fight for reform, joined forces with the Guillen family, presenting a unified, powerful front that Washington could no longer ignore. The combined pressure was immense. On December 15, 2021, the Vanessa Guillen Act was brought to the floor for a vote. The result was a landslide. 89 in favor, 10 abstaining. It passed. President Biden held a formal press conference to sign the bill into law. In a direct consequence of the new law and the intense scrutiny it brought, 14 officers at Fort Hood were severely disciplined for their leadership failures. In that moment, Maya Carter knew her family's fight had given her sister's death a profound, lasting meaning. Specialist Jasmine Carter was gone forever, but her name was now etched into the annals of American history. In a way she could never have imagined, she had completed her mission. She had protected her fellow soldiers and served her country. But if she could turn back time, one has to wonder if she would ever have chosen to walk that path again. Her tragic death was not just a crime, it was a mirror held up to the United States military, reflecting the decay and absolute power that had been allowed to fester in the dark. Her legacy is a testament to the fact that no system, no matter how powerful, is immune to the demand for justice when a family's love refuses to be silenced.